Okay, so you kind of touched on it in your answer, but the next part of that is, so the OODA loop's going on, something's happened and it's gotten inside your OODA loop and it's broken it, and that's when the stress starts, and that's when you start making rash and bad decisions. What would you tell somebody that say they're in that situation right now? Because I know when we moved, like I said, I wasn't wired as tightly as I thought I was, and I did not handle it nearly as well.
What went wrong? Why do you say that?
You know, because for me personally, it was the fact that we had to sell a homestead that I worked on for 8 years and turned it into a $500,000 piece of property, and we ended up moving a working homestead 180 miles in 45 days, animals and everything. And I was really bitter about it, and that caused a cascade effect, and I started making, I wouldn't say I made bad decisions, but I was not in a positive headspace. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I spent 3 months in 2022 where I did not leave this property except to go to work and to the occasional social engagements that Angela drug me to. Other than that, I was here. I had no desire to be anyplace else. I didn't want to.
You were upset. You were depressed. Like you had it all going on.
Yeah, I don't know if I was depressed. Because I'd been depressed before. I don't know if I got that bad, but it was one of those cases where I couldn't see the forest for the trees, and the trees were my bitterness. The trees were all the work that had to be done, and so I could never get ahead of it all. It seemed like I was always running behind, and it wasn't. It finally clicked for me is when I realized that we had bugged out, is when it finally started changing for me, and my perspective changed. And in fact, I just did a video not too terribly long ago where I walked around the property and I showed everything that's wrong with the property. Not everything. I hit the major parts. Yeah. But I was working on the roof, and so I crawled up on the roof and I sat up on the roof and I took a look at the property. It's turning out to be a lovely piece of property. Yeah, it's got its issues still, but it's turning out to be a lovely piece of property, but that changed perspective. But for me, it just happened accidentally. It wasn't anything that I purposely did, and if you could give anybody advice on how to, once they realize that their OODA loop is broken, how do they get it back on track and neutralize all that negativity that it causes?
Well, I think the first part is you have to understand that it is a negative experience, right? And so you have to look at it and remind yourself that, hey, I just had a major thing happen, right? And when we get stuck in the middle of it, sometimes this is really hard to do, right? And so it's admitting like, okay, I had a really this is a terrible thing. I'm not happy about this. It's you're really kind of entering the grieving, like with what you went through. It kind of sounds like maybe you're entering the grieving process, right? Because it's a loss, right? And so the thing to remember, like for in your case, for example, is that when we have the grieving process, you go through denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance, and all that, right? All those stages of grief. Well, it's a process. We have to go through it. Sometimes you move forward in it, sometimes you move back. But it's like getting on the freeway to go somewhere. You got to go down the road to get to where you're going to go. And it's part of the human condition. We can't beat it. The good thing, though, is if we go into, like in your situation, go, okay, you can admit, at the time you catch yourself like, okay, maybe I'm like going through some sort of grieving process. Then when we're in a mood, we go, oh, I'm in this stage. And I've always found, because this is how I manage my post-traumatic stress all the time. It's like, oh, this is going on right now. I'm anxious. Oh, well, that makes sense. I'm anxious. And as soon as I go, I kind of understand why I'm anxious. That's part of the process. Yeah. It like lowers the anxiety of it because now I know what's going on. It's like, oh, I'm not just randomly mad at the world right now. It's I actually have something happening. And then the other side of it too is when people are going through it, understand that when we feel attacked, right? And that's what you went through. You're getting attacked. People are forcing you to make a decision you don't want to have to make, right? And it's like an attack. And when we do that, what happens? anytime we get attacked, typically we enter, unless you have a lot of experience, like, guys in combat that can keep their chill going. Mm-hmm. But when it's not something you're used to, like you're like, yeah, that's not something hopefully you ever have to go again. So it's kind of a one-off. If it ever happened again, you'd probably be better off with it, better handling it. But when that happens, it kicks in a sympathetic nervous system response, a central nervous system response, right? And so anytime you bring the central nervous system into it, you have two sides of it, the parasympathetic and the sympathetic. It's all biological when this stuff happens. And so when the sympathetic nervous system response comes in, you got the, fight, flight, or freeze. You can go from having a little bit of involvement where it's making you just do a little bit, all the way up to where, people go crazy and make decisions that they later regret, or make decisions that aren't effective decisions they thought out just because it's a reaction. So right. I think when you get caught in that, if you can remind yourself, like, and it's hard, right, to pull yourself out of it. But when that first time comes where you can get a chance, like, what's going on with me right now? Take a breath and literally take a deep breath and blow it out. That helps engage the parasympathetic nervous system. Parasympathetic nervous system shuts down the sympathetic nervous system, or it helps. And then say, you know what? I think I might be having a reaction to everything that's going on. And then go from there. And remember, it's okay to have that reaction. You can't escape it. It's escaping it would say you're not human, right? And so, and telling don't beat yourself up over it, but then, sit back and say, yeah, I'm entitled to be pissed off right now. But what can I do? Or I'm entitled to be scared. I'm entitled, put your emotion here. And then it's, all right, what do I need to do to make this thing better? And some of the things, like you moving, there's coping tools that apply to all this. And it's one of, like, the post-traumatic stress stuff. It's called, there's one opposites, right? And it means do something else. Like, I'm going down this road. I'm in this funk over this thing that I keep trying to think about. I'm going to go do something else. Because now once you shift your focus, it takes you off of what you were doing, right? And it lessens the impact of that. There's coping ahead. If you see something coming, the next time they start telling us, oh, the COVID-24 is coming, well, you can start coping ahead a little bit and say, hey, I know this is coming, and here's the route that they did last time, so I should have these expectations of how it's going to happen. Because with the OODA Loop and all this, if you're ahead of the game and you understand what's going to happen, and when it does happen, you're more prepared to deal with it, right? It's not as shocking, any of that stuff. So I think, again, a lot of it is, I think, examine where you're at. We can't control the world, can't control what other people do. All we can do is work on how we respond to it.
Thanks, Milo.